Rachel Morgan had always believed she was a logical woman. Numbers made sense. Patterns mattered. If the math didn't check out, something was off, and she always found the discrepancy. It was a skill that served her well as a financial director at one of Vancouver's top eco-development firms. But in her own home, it took her longer to apply that same precision. Because when love is involved, the facts are easy to ignore. It started with a message preview. Innocent enough until it wasn't. One early Tuesday morning, Rachel got out of bed before her husband, Eric, as she always did. She had a quarterly board meeting to prepare for, and a few spreadsheets still open on her laptop in the kitchen. As she stepped into the ensuite bathroom, she noticed Eric's phone buzzing on the marble counter. A message popped up. Lena Cherry Blossom, I can't wait for Friday. Your hands, that cabin, that secret smile. Counting down every second. Rachel didn't move. The toothbrush in her hand remained still, mint foam drying at the corners of her lips. The phone screen dimmed a few seconds later, but it didn't matter. She had already memorized every word. Lena. The name meant nothing at first glance. But the message? It was unmistakable. Intimate. Specific. This wasn't a flirtation. It was a continuation. Behind the frosted glass of the shower door, Eric hummed lightly, off-key, oblivious. Rachel stood frozen for a moment, staring at her reflection. Her breath fogged the mirror. Her hands were steady. She finished brushing, washed her face, and dried her skin with a towel. Then she walked out of the bathroom like nothing had happened. Eric stood by the dresser, pulling a sweater over his head. He kissed her on the cheek, said something about late client meetings this week, and grabbed his duffel bag for a supposed business trip to Calgary. Rachel nodded. Don't forget to pack the gray wool coat. The weather's changing. Her voice was calm, unshaken. Eric smiled, grateful, and disappeared out the door. Rachel didn't ask about the message. Not yet. Over the following days, Rachel became an observer in her own marriage. She watched how Eric smiled at his phone now, always slightly to himself. How he brought it with him into the shower. Left it face down, and silenced the sound during dinner. It hadn't always been like this. They used to share playlists, grocery lists, and jokes. Now the phone was an extension of a secret life. He no longer asked her about her work. He no longer noticed when she wore her hair differently or changed the throw pillows on the sofa, the ones they picked out together in Whistler just 2 years ago. Rachel used to tell herself, maybe this is what long-term love becomes, predictable, quiet. But no. This wasn't quiet. It was hollow. And the worst part? She wasn't surprised. On Thursday night, Eric left again, claiming he had to meet an out-of-town investor flying in from Toronto. Rachel nodded. She sat at the kitchen table after he left, sipping green tea in silence. Staring at the space where his laptop used to sit. It now had a new password. One she wasn't given. That night, she didn't sleep much. Instead, she scrolled through old emails and memories, piecing together the timeline of his excuses. There was always a client. Always a dinner. Always a flight. The details had always seemed believable until now. She opened their shared calendar. Eric had marked the entire weekend as off-the-grid training retreat. Rachel smirked bitterly. So that's what it was now, a retreat. Friday morning, she called in a personal day. She told her assistant she had a migraine. It wasn't a lie. Her head did hurt, but it wasn't physical. It was the weight of truth pressing down on her, slowly and mercilessly. She walked down to the cafe around the corner, ordered a cappuccino, and sat by the window. She opened her laptop and began searching. Lena Mitchell. Vancouver. Medical sales. It didn't take long. There she was on LinkedIn. 36. A regional sales rep for a medical tech company. Blonde hair, high cheekbones, a professional yet flirtatious smile in her profile photo. Married to Derek Mitchell, a well-known landscape architect in West Vancouver. Rachel leaned back in her chair, reading the profile again and again. There it was. All of it. Lena had the kind of polished charm that could easily slip into someone else's life without leaving fingerprints. But Rachel saw it all clearly now. When Eric returned Sunday night, Rachel was reading in bed. She looked up briefly, offered a tight smile, and asked, "How was the retreat?" "Exhausting," he replied, kissing her forehead. "No phone signal, tons of workshops." "I'm beat." Rachel nodded. "Glad you're home." She watched as he undressed, tossed his bag in the closet, and went to shower. As soon as the water started running, she walked to the laundry hamper and pulled out his shirt, still faintly scented with pinewood, cologne, and a floral perfume she didn't wear. She folded the shirt calmly and placed it on the dresser. Then she returned to bed, opened her planner, and wrote just one word on Friday's page. Watch. Because Rachel Morgan wasn't about to scream or cry. She wasn't going to throw plates or demand explanations. She was going to gather. Observe. Verify. Then she would act. And when she did, Eric wouldn't see it coming. It took Rachel 3 days to decide how to approach him. She stared at Derek Mitchell's LinkedIn photo more times than she could count, square jaw, salt and pepper stubble. The tired eyes of a man who looked like he worked with his hands, but carried the weight of something more. There was no public email, but his firm's website had a contact form. Too impersonal. She searched a little deeper, finally finding his work number listed on a municipal landscape design document for a public park. That's how she got his cell. And that's how she found herself standing in her kitchen, heart pounding, staring at a blank message window at 7:32 a.m. on a Monday morning. She finally typed. "Hi Derek. My name is Rachel Morgan. I believe your wife Lena is having an affair with my husband Eric. If you're willing to talk, I can provide proof. My number is 778555461. She hovered over the send button. Her thumb didn't tremble. Her pulse did. Click. The message was sent. Derek called less than 3 hours later. His voice was calm but low. And there was a hesitation behind every word, like a man building a bridge over cracking ice. "Is this some kind of prank?" "I wish it was," Rachel replied. "I have screenshots of their messages. Her name appears regularly in his texts. I also found a cabin booking in Kelowna. Your name was used as a guest once, last year." Silence. Then, "Can we meet somewhere?" They agreed on a cafe in Langley, neutral territory halfway between their homes. Rachel arrived first. She wore a black sweater, no makeup, hair tied back. She didn't want to perform, she wanted clarity. Derek walked in 10 minutes later. He looked exactly like his photo, except more tired. His coat was dusted with cedar chips. He nodded when he saw her and sat down across from her in the booth. She said nothing at first. Instead, she slid her phone across the table and tapped the screen. A thread of messages lit up. One read, "Your hands on my neck last time. I can still feel them. This weekend can't come soon enough." Derek didn't flinch. He just read. Quietly. Swipe. Swipe. A photo. A voice message. A map pin. Finally, he closed his eyes and exhaled deeply. "I thought something was off," he said. "But I didn't want to believe it. I thought we were just drifting. I thought it was work pressure. Burnout, something fixable." Rachel folded her hands on the table. "I know the feeling." Derek looked at her, really looked at her. "You're calm," he said. I've had time to rehearse. They sat in silence for several minutes, letting the gravity of shared betrayal settle between them. Then Rachel said, "They're meeting again this Friday. Eric has booked the cabin near Kelowna. I recognized it from a receipt in our credit card statement. I double-checked the address, it's one you designed. Your signature stonework is in the listing photos." Derek blinked. That's my family's cabin. I designed it for my parents years ago. Lena and I used to spend long weekends there, before she started claiming she was too busy. Rachel nodded. She's not too busy. She's just otherwise engaged. They looked at each other. The same conclusion was forming in both their minds. This wasn't just betrayal. It was a betrayal carried out with arrogance, comfort, and no expectation of consequence. Rachel leaned in slightly. I'm not interested in drama. I'm not here to throw punches or make a scene. But I do think they deserve to face the truth. Together. Derek sipped his coffee and nodded slowly. You're thinking what, show up at the cabin? Rachel tilted her head. Yes. Before they arrive. Let them walk in and see us sitting there. No yelling. No theatrics. Just presence. He considered it. Then said, I still have the key. Lena doesn't know I kept a copy. Rachel smiled faintly. Then I guess we're going to Kelowna. They agreed to meet again Thursday night to finalize the details. The plan was simple, arrive at the cabin early Sunday morning. Set the stage. Let truth do the talking. Rachel would bring printed messages, photos, and credit card statements. Derek would bring the cabin key and a bottle of red wine, Lena's favorite, for poetic effect. Before parting, Derek asked, why not just leave them? Rachel paused before answering. Because I want them to see the cost of their decisions, not just walk away assuming we were blind or weak. I want them to see the people they hurt sitting across from them, strong and unbroken. He nodded slowly. That's fair. That night, Rachel sat at her dining table, a stack of papers before her. Her wedding album sat untouched in the corner. She didn't cry. She didn't rage. She just highlighted dates, printed screenshots, and organized her pain into folders, measured, labeled, and clear. It was time to reclaim her narrative. And she wouldn't do it alone. The gravel crackled beneath Rachel's tires as her car pulled up beside Derek's at the remote lakeside cabin in Kelowna. A veil of fog hovered above the water. The trees were still. Everything about the morning felt like the quiet before a storm. Derek stood on the porch, holding 2 mugs of coffee. Steam curling into the crisp air. Rachel stepped out, wearing a navy coat and carrying a tote bag filled with carefully arranged documents, text messages, credit card statements, printed photos. And a voice memo from Eric's assistant, unknowingly confirming he had no meeting in Calgary this weekend. Sleep? Derek asked, handing her a cup. Not really, Rachel said. But I'm ready. They walked inside together. The cabin smelled like cedarwood and faint traces of perfume that lingered from previous visits. Derek moved through the space methodically, lighting the fireplace, adjusting the blinds for soft light. Rachel laid out 4 wine glasses on the table and placed the red wine bottle Lena favored in the center. The chairs were positioned facing the door. No one would enter without seeing them first. Feels like we're staging a scene, Derek said quietly. We are, Rachel replied. But the script writes itself. They didn't speak much after that. They just prepared, measured and composed. 2 people whose lives had been cracked open by the same wound, now stitching themselves back together through clarity. By 5:30 p.m., everything was in place. At 5:58, they heard the car. Tires on gravel. A door slam. Footsteps. Laughter. Rachel and Derek sat in the armchairs, perfectly still, glasses untouched. Folders closed on the table like time bombs. The front door swung open. Lena stepped in first, a bouquet of tulips in hand, her face bright with anticipation, until her eyes caught Rachel. She froze. Eric walked in behind her, bumping into her back with a smile. "What's the hold-up?" Then he looked up. His smile vanished. Rachel didn't blink. Eric's mouth opened slightly, but no words came. "Welcome," Rachel said gently. "We've been expecting you." Eric's gaze darted to the wine glasses. The familiar bottle. The neatly stacked folders. He dropped the overnight bag with a dull thud. "Rachel, what are you?" She raised a hand. "No need to lie." "Not tonight." Lena took a shaky step backward. "Derek." He leaned forward in his chair. "Save it." Rachel stood slowly and placed a manila folder in front of Eric. "You lied to my face for months. These are your words, not mine. Read them, or don't. Either way, I know the truth." Eric's jaw clenched. "You went through my phone." "I went through my life," she replied calmly. "And found pieces you thought I'd never notice." Derek stood next. He turned to Lena. Voice steady but weighted. "The cabin you chose for your affair. I designed it. I know every inch of this place. I still had the key." Lena's eyes filled. "Please." "Derek, it wasn't supposed to." He cut her off. "Supposed to what?" "Be real. Be discovered." Lena reached for the tulips and slowly set them down on the table, as if placing a white flag. The silence stretched long and uneasy. Finally, Rachel spoke. "There's something I haven't said. I didn't just find the messages. I tracked the payments, the reservations, the excuses. You covered your trail well, Eric. But not well enough." He opened the folder with a reluctant hand, flipping through texts, receipts, and a printed screenshot of the restaurant bill from a place he told Rachel he'd never been. He exhaled sharply, lips pressed thin. "So this is a sting operation now?" "No," Rachel said. "This is the truth catching up." Suddenly, Lena stepped forward, her hands trembling. "I need to say something," she whispered. "Something that changes things." Eric turned to her, confused. Lena looked at Derek, then at Rachel. Her eyes brimmed, but there was no pity to be earned here. "I'm pregnant," she said softly. Rachel's breath caught. Eric's eyes widened. "What?" Lena nodded slowly, her voice cracking. "I found out last week. I was going to tell you, Eric, but," she turned to Derek. "The baby is yours." The room went silent. Derek's face went pale. His hands dropped to his sides. "Are you sure?" Lena nodded. "We always used protection," she said to Eric. "But not with Derek, not when I thought we still had something left." Eric turned to Rachel. But she didn't flinch. She was already beyond the point of shock. She was in the realm of certainty now, where heartbreak settles into something colder and clearer. "You came to this place," Rachel said slowly, "the same place you once promised to take me for our 10th anniversary, to betray me. To lie. And now you're standing in a room full of consequences you never expected to face." Eric tried to speak, but Rachel held up a second folder. "This contains the initial draft of our divorce agreement. I've consulted my lawyer. I've moved our joint funds. It's clean, legal, and final." She stepped back. "You can read it later." Lena turned to Derek. "I didn't plan this. I never meant to hurt anyone." "You didn't plan to get caught," he said, voice flat. "No." Lena whispered. "But I meant what I said about you. You were always kind. I was just restless. And now I'm scared." "You should be," Derek said. Because honesty should have come months ago. Not after everything burned. Rachel picked up her coat. I didn't come here for revenge, she said. I came to end a lie. Derek nodded silently. And together they stepped outside into the darkening twilight, leaving behind two people whose affair had unraveled beneath the weight of quiet truth. As the door shut behind them, neither Rachel nor Derek looked back. They didn't need to. What was broken could no longer be saved. And sometimes the strongest closure is silence. The divorce papers were filed by Tuesday morning. Rachel stood in line at the Vancouver courthouse, documents in hand, dressed not in black or gray, but in a soft teal coat that hugged her shoulders like a second skin. The clerk at the counter didn't ask for details, just a signature, a date, and an ID. She gave each with steady hands. The air outside was brisk but not bitter. Spring had begun to stretch its limbs in the city. As she stepped onto the sidewalk, the faint scent of cherry blossoms wafted through the air. It was over. Not the pain, but the pretending. Not the years, but the weight of them. Eric, for his part, didn't fight her on the divorce. After the confrontation at the cabin, he moved into a friend's condo in Burnaby. Rachel hadn't seen him since. Their communication had dwindled to terse emails, all legal, all necessary. No apologies. No justifications. Just silence. Rachel didn't crave his guilt. She didn't replay what he might be feeling. Her focus was on recalibration, on becoming a woman who no longer carried the burden of someone else's betrayal. She contacted a trusted lawyer, laid out the financials, and listed the house for sale. The firm where she worked gave her space, paid leave and access to a private grief counselor. But Rachel declined the time off. I need the structure, she told her HR director. Not a break. A rebuild. Back in the condo, she began reclaiming her life piece by piece. The bedroom was rearranged. The furniture she'd once bought with Eric now sat differently. The dining table, once set for two, was repurposed as a workbench for her side business. A financial coaching project she'd shelved years ago. She reactivated the domain. She updated the branding. She made her pain useful. And in those quiet hours between spreadsheets and soft music, she began to heal. Eric's world, on the other hand, started to erode. Word had spread, discreetly at first, then with a bite. The firm where he worked, a mid-size corporate litigation office, had a reputation to uphold. It wasn't the affair that damaged him most. It was the lie he told to book client retreats at the Kelowna cabin, falsifying expense reports to cover his personal trips. Rachel hadn't reported him. But she didn't have to. Human Resources flagged discrepancies while reviewing his travel logs. A call was made. An inquiry followed. Then a suspension. Within 3 weeks, Eric was let go with a severance that barely covered his remaining debts. Rachel knew only because one of her former colleagues had quietly messaged her. He's gone. Guess karma doesn't always wait. She didn't respond. What was there to say? Lena remained mostly invisible during this time. Derek had chosen not to share much with Rachel beyond a single update. She's keeping the baby. We're not together, but I'm helping. That was all Rachel needed to know. The story no longer belonged to her. In the evenings, Rachel would sometimes walk along the seawall near English Bay. Headphones in, the soft lapping of waves mixing with the slow piano playlists she had once abandoned. She wasn't lonely. She was alone. And there's a difference. She had removed the dead weight. Now, she was learning to fly light. One Saturday morning, Rachel visited her parents in Victoria. Over tea in the sunlit kitchen, her mother looked at her closely and said, "You're different." Rachel smiled softly. "How so?"" Like, not hardened but tempered." Rachel nodded. That's what truth does. It breaks you. Then it remakes you. Back in Vancouver. The final hearing was swift and clean. Eric didn't show up. His lawyer represented him via teleconference. The division of assets favored Rachel, not because she demanded it, but because she had built most of it. She kept the retirement accounts. The sale of their house was already underway, with her receiving the majority equity. It wasn't revenge. It was restoration. The day the divorce was finalized, she walked out of the courthouse and let herself exhale fully for the first time in weeks. She didn't cry. She didn't smile. She just felt whole. That evening, Derek sent a simple message. Heard the news. You okay? She replied. Yes. And thank you for walking through it with me. He responded. You didn't walk. You soared. Rachel didn't know what the future held. She wasn't dreaming of new love or plotting revenge romances. She wasn't interested in reinventing herself to prove anything. She was just becoming Rachel again. The Rachel who loved books and spreadsheets. The Rachel who laughed loudly in the kitchen. The Rachel who trusted herself before trusting anyone else. The ferry ride from Vancouver to Victoria felt like the final page in one chapter and the quiet prelude to another. Rachel stood at the edge of the deck. Wind brushing strands of her chestnut hair across her cheeks. The ocean stretched endlessly ahead, blue, deep, unknowable. Just like the life that now waited for her on the island. She had sold the condo. Finalized the business paperwork. Packed her things into 5 labeled boxes and 2 suitcases. It was all she wanted to bring with her. That and peace. Her new home sat on the outskirts of Victoria, a modest single-story house perched near the shoreline. The back porch overlooked the ocean, framed by tall grasses that danced with the breeze. The interior was light, open, and quiet. The kind of place built for listening, to waves, to wind, to your own thoughts. The first night, Rachel unpacked only the essentials, her kettle, her journal, a thick wool blanket, and her old bookshelf. Then she made tea, curled up in the armchair by the window, and watched the sea darken as night gently fell. She didn't feel lonely. She felt home. Within weeks, she'd set up her private financial consulting business, Morgan Advisory, a discreet service for women navigating divorce, asset division, or financial rebuilding. Her first clients came from quiet referrals, a friend of a friend, a neighbor's cousin, a woman from her grief group. Rachel didn't just give them spreadsheets. She gave them language. Confidence. Clarity. You're not starting over, she'd tell them. You're starting from experience. She didn't advertise loudly. She didn't need to. Her work spoke with a soft but steady voice, just like her. Outside work, Rachel returned to the things she'd left behind. She joined a local book club that met in a cozy cafe near Fisherman's Wharf. She rediscovered her love for hiking, winding her way through the lush trails of Goldstream Park. On quiet afternoons, she'd walk through the local market and linger by the flower stalls, no longer waiting for someone else to buy them. She chose her own bouquets now. Peonies, mostly. The kind that bloom wide and unapologetically. She also began journaling again. Not for pain, but for reflection. Her entries were no longer about betrayal or endings. They were about sunrises, clients, the sound of gulls in the morning, a good meal she made for herself without reason. Every few weeks, she and Derek would exchange messages, short, warm, and never intrusive. Saw a woman paddleboarding this morning. Thought of you and your ocean view. Client just named her puppy Rachel. You've officially made an impression. She didn't ask about Lena. He didn't bring it up often. But in one message, months later, he said, "Baby's here. Her name is Nora." Claire and I are figuring it out, co-parents, not partners. But we're honest now. And that counts for something. Rachel sent back a simple reply. That's all any of us can hope for, honesty. Give Nora a kiss on the head from me. And with that, they remained gently tethered, not by pain anymore but by mutual respect. Survivors who had chosen dignity over destruction. One afternoon in early autumn, Rachel sat on her porch, sipping tea with a client-turned-friend named Simone, a 52-year-old nurse who had just finalized her divorce. "You seem so calm," Simone said, watching the wind stir the tall grasses. Rachel smiled. "That took time. And silence. And a few ugly cries." Simone laughed. Then grew quiet. "Do you ever regret not confronting him sooner?" Rachel thought about it. The night she saw the message. The moment in the cabin. The signed papers in a courthouse hallway. "No," she said finally. "I needed to wait until I could speak from clarity, not chaos. When I finally confronted him, I didn't want his guilt. I wanted my freedom." Simone nodded, wiping a tear. "You really are different, Rachel. You don't just survive. You rebuild." Rachel looked out at the sea, where two kayaks floated quietly in the distance. "I think most of us have that ability," she said. "We just forget. We think our story ends when someone betrays us. But it doesn't. It just rewrites the next chapter." That night, Rachel wrote a letter in her journal. Not to Eric, but to herself. "Dear Rachel, you didn't deserve what happened. But you handled it with grace. You didn't scream. You didn't shatter. You walked through fire and came out clearer. Softer in the right places. Stronger in others. You are not the affair. You are not the pain. You are not the silence you once sat through. You are the life you chose after. The porch you sit on now. The waves that keep coming. The women who now find you because you chose to keep going. Keep choosing yourself. Always." The next morning, she woke early, no alarm. No noise, just the soft pink of sunrise spilling across the ocean. She wrapped a shawl around her shoulders, opened every window in the house, and let the wind sweep through every room. It no longer smelled like memory. It smelled like her future. Winter came early to Victoria that year. Not with a blizzard but a slow hush, fog rolling in from the water, mornings wrapped in silver. And the scent of cedar rising from the woods nearby. Rachel welcomed it. She had come to love the quiet seasons. She stood by the bay window, a mug of peppermint tea warming her hands. Her breath fogging the glass ever so slightly. Outside, gulls drifted lazily above the water, and the tall grasses in her backyard bowed with the breeze. This was her peace. Not the kind that arrives because all is perfect, but the kind earned, one truth at a time, one boundary at a time, one choice at a time. Rachel had not looked for love after Eric. She didn't scroll through dating apps, didn't let well-meaning friends introduce her to someone great. That chapter, for now, had no place in her book. Instead, she fell in love with her mornings. With the way the kettle steamed and the radio hummed. With walking to the community library just because. With writing in her journal like no one would ever read it. She planted rosemary and thyme by her kitchen window. Started experimenting with bread recipes on Sunday afternoons. Her life wasn't dramatic anymore. It was rich in stillness. Derek and Rachel still spoke occasionally, messages, the rare phone call, a holiday card in the mail. There were no expectations between them, only understanding. One Saturday in March, he visited Victoria for a design conference and asked if she had time for a coffee. She agreed. They met at a cozy cafe near Oak Bay. He had a small box of cookies for her, shortbread with sea salt. "Nora's teething," he said with a laugh, sitting across from her. "But she's sturdy." Like her mom. Like you. Rachel smiled. You're doing well. We are. Separate homes. Clear schedules. We're honest now. It's a strange kind of peace, but it's real. They sipped quietly. There was no spark, no unfinished story between them. Just mutual respect between two people who had looked betrayal in the eye and chosen not to be consumed by it. I read something the other day, Derek said, stirring his coffee. It said, sometimes strength is just not letting the worst thing that ever happened to you define you forever. Made me think of you. Rachel didn't reply right away. Instead, she reached into her purse, pulled out a small card, and handed it to him. It read, Morgan Advisory, Rebuilding Wealth and Worth for Women Starting Over. I'm not defined by what happened, she said quietly. But I am using it. Over the months, Rachel's consulting firm grew, not in size but in depth. She helped women untangle financial messes, walk through estate planning, rebuild credit, start over. But more than that, she listened. She became a quiet mentor. Someone who understood not only spreadsheets, but the shame that can come after betrayal. The silence. The self-doubt. One client, a retired teacher named Colleen, said after her final session, "You gave me more than numbers, Rachel. You gave me permission to hope again." Rachel smiled. That was enough. By spring, Rachel began hosting small monthly gatherings at her home, 5 or 6 women at a time, sitting around the table with tea and notebooks. They didn't call it group therapy. They called it the second chapter circle. No one spoke over each other. There were no forced revelations. Just quiet sharing. Some stories ended in divorce. Some in loss. Some in rediscovery. Rachel never dominated the conversation. She didn't need to. She had already walked through her fire. Now, she held the torch so others could see their way forward. In private moments, Rachel still thought of Eric. Not out of longing, but as a reminder of how far she'd come. She hadn't seen him in nearly a year. Word through mutual friends was that he had moved to Edmonton and taken a job at a smaller firm. The whispers said he was quieter now. Humbled. She bore him no ill will. What she felt was gratitude. Not for the betrayal, but for the clarity that followed it. For the chance to rebuild her life without apology. One late summer evening, Rachel sat on her back porch, a blanket over her lap. A glass of rose in her hand. The sea shimmered under the golden light, and the breeze carried the faintest trace of lavender from the potted plants lining the deck. She thought about all the things she'd once feared she'd never have again: peace, clarity, confidence. And yet, here she was. Alone. But never lonely. Quiet. But never empty. Still. But full of purpose. She took a sip, closed her eyes, and smiled. Not every journey ends in new love. Some journeys end in self-love, in the rediscovery of voice and value. Rachel Morgan didn't rewrite her story to impress anyone. She simply refused to let betrayal be the last word. Instead, she wrote, resilience. Rebirth. Restoration. Not because the world handed her healing, but because she created it, one steady choice at a time. In life, betrayal often arrives not with a bang, but with a whisper, a message on a screen. A glance that lingers too long, or a truth long suspected but quietly endured. Rachel Morgan's journey is not just about uncovering infidelity, it's about what we do after the truth breaks through. Do we allow pain to define us, or do we rise through it with grace? Her story teaches us that true empowerment doesn't come from revenge or noise, it comes from the quiet, deliberate choice to honor our worth, even when others don't. Rachel didn't rebuild her life to prove anything to the ones who hurt her. She did it to reclaim herself, one step at a time. She chose dignity over destruction, healing over bitterness, and authenticity over pretense. How often do we, especially in our later years, stay silent to preserve what's familiar, even when that silence costs us our peace? Rachel's transformation reminds us it is never too late to start again, not out of anger but from love for ourselves. Whether you're 38 or 68, ask yourself, if faced with betrayal or loss, would you have the strength to walk away, not just from the person who hurt you, but from the version of yourself that accepted less than you deserved? And if the answer is uncertain, maybe that's where your next chapter begins. Because life doesn't end when someone breaks your heart. Sometimes, that's exactly when it starts.